Hi, I'm Claire Larkin, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people closest to you, especially family, can become your worst enemy when it comes to business. For 10 years, I dedicated every ounce of my energy to our family's small tech startup. I poured my heart and soul into it, transforming it from a struggling venture barely scraping by into a $60 million enterprise. But with success came something I didn't expect: jealousy, even from the people I thought would celebrate my triumphs. It all started when our family business was just a small tech support shop tucked away in the corner of a downtown neighborhood. My father, James Larkin, started it more than 20 years ago, and it was his pride and joy. But despite his hard work, it was never enough to bring in much revenue. It barely kept the lights on. My older brother, Mark, was always Dad's golden child, the one who excelled in every academic subject, went to the most prestigious business school in the country, and had a corporate job at a top-tier finance firm. And then there was me, the one who chose a quieter path. While my brother was busy rubbing elbows with executives, I stayed behind to help Dad with the business while I pursued my computer science degree at a nearby state college. "Claire, you're wasting your time here," Mark would say when he came home for the holidays. "You should be doing something bigger. You're so much smarter than this." But I saw something in our small shop that Mark didn't: the potential. While Mark studied business theories, I was learning how to write code, how to recognize gaps in the market, and how to solve real-world problems. By the time I finished college, I had developed a proprietary software tool, a simple but effective solution for small businesses to manage inventory. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was intuitive, affordable, and most importantly, useful. Dad didn't quite understand at first. He was skeptical, but when we started getting orders from local businesses, his attitude slowly began to change. "You might be onto something, kid," he said one day, his voice filled with pride. That moment meant everything to me. If only I had known that it would be short-lived. The business grew steadily under my leadership. I worked long hours, often 14-hour days, 7 days a week. Meanwhile, Mark was rising through the ranks at his corporate firm in the city, never once considering taking a step into the family business. I was building something real, something that had meaning. Our little shop grew into a software development company, and we attracted clients from local businesses to national corporations. My best friend Lisa always worried about me working too much. "Don't forget to live, Claire," she would say, bringing me dinner late at night when I stayed at the office. But I couldn't stop. I was driven by a vision, and maybe deep down I wanted to prove myself to my family. 5 years into our journey, the company hit its first $1 million in annual revenue. That's when Mark suddenly decided to take an interest in the family business. After quitting his job in the city, he came home, stating at a family dinner, "I think it's time I step in and take charge. With my business expertise, we could really grow this company." Dad beamed at him. "That's fantastic, son. We could use someone with your experience around here." I sat there stunned. My hand froze midair with my fork. The company I had worked tirelessly to build from nothing, my blood, sweat and tears, was about to be handed over to my brother without a second thought. But I didn't say anything. I swallowed my frustration, convincing myself to be a team player. After all, Mark was family, and surely he had my best interests at heart. Mark was appointed co-CEO, alongside me, despite having no real experience in the tech industry. Dad insisted it would look better for the company to have someone with his credentials at the helm. I focused on product development and client relationships, while Mark handled the public-facing aspects of the business, like investor relations and marketing. The next 5 years were a whirlwind of change. While I continued developing software and managing our growing client base, Mark focused on making himself the public face of the company. He gave interviews, accepted accolades, and took credit for ideas that I had spent years perfecting. He was constantly in the spotlight, while I worked in the background, often feeling pushed aside. The revenue grew, reaching $60 million annually, but the tension between Mark and me grew even more. Then came Dad's 65th birthday celebration, a day that would change everything. Mark had insisted on throwing a huge party at an upscale hotel, inviting all our business associates and industry peers. It wasn't so much a birthday celebration, as it was an opportunity for Mark to further solidify his position. When I arrived early to help with preparations, he immediately criticized my attire. "Don't you think you could have made more of an effort?" he asked with a sneer, his eyes scanning me up and down. I didn't answer, but I worked tirelessly in the background, making sure everything ran smooth. When dinner arrived, Mark stood up to give a speech. I expected the usual, a few heartfelt words about Dad's contributions to the company, but instead he dropped a bombshell. "As we celebrate Dad's 65th birthday," Mark began, his voice echoing across the room. "I'd like to announce some big changes at Larkin Technologies. The board and I have decided that in order to continue growing, we need to implement unified leadership. Effective immediately, I will be taking over as the sole CEO." I froze, my blood running cold. The board? What board? For the first time I looked to Dad for support, but instead of stepping in, he nodded along with Mark, a proud smile on his face. I felt the weight of betrayal crashing down on me. Mark continued, his voice laced with condescension. "Claire's been great at handling the technical side, but to really push the company forward, we need someone with real business acumen. My sister's outdated ideas are holding us back." The room was silent, as everyone turned to look at me. I was humiliated in front of our clients, partners and friends, but I didn't react. I simply stood up, quietly walked over to Dad, and placed a small wrapped gift in front of him. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said softly, before walking out of the ballroom. That night, as I sat in my office surrounded by patents and awards bearing my name, I made a decision. Mark may have thought he won, but he had underestimated me. He didn't know everything I had built, and he certainly didn't know what I was capable of. The next morning I arrived at the office early. At 9 a.m. Mark and Dad strolled in, expecting to continue their victory lap, but I had a surprise waiting for them. I pulled up a document on the conference room screen, and reminded them of something important. I owned 51% of the company's shares. Not only that, but the software that generated most of our revenue was owned by my separate company, Larkin Innovations. "Remember that agreement from 3 years ago, Dad? The one you signed without reading?" That's when I quietly took control. Mark's face turned pale as I showed them the emails I had sent out to our clients, informing them of the leadership changes. Contracts were being terminated, and developers were already jumping ship to my new company. "Your move," I said, my voice calm but firm. In the end I took full control of Larkin Technologies. Mark and Dad were left with the option to either step aside, or watch everything they built crumble. They chose to step aside. I spent the next year rebuilding the company, making it stronger than ever. Mark found a job at a small startup, and Dad retired, realizing the legacy he had tried to hand over was no longer his to claim. The company tripled in value under my leadership, and while I still loved my family, the bonds we once shared were broken. Sometimes in business, and in life, it's the quiet ones who have the strength to rise, to rebuild and to take control when everything is on the line. I learned that the hard way, but it made me who I am today. And while I could have taken the path of revenge, I chose to focus on growth. My success speaks for itself, and I've learned to be content knowing that I've proven myself not only to my family, but to the world. I swallowed my objections, and tried to be a team player. Emma was appointed co-CEO alongside me, despite having no experience in our industry. Dad insisted that it would be good for the company image to have someone with her prestigious credentials at the helm. I focused on product development and operations, while Emma handled marketing and investor relations. The next 5 years were a study in contrast. While I continued developing new software solutions and maintaining client relationships, Emma focused on creating a glamorous image for herself as the public face of the company. She gave interviews about being a woman in tech and accepted awards for entrepreneurship, all while taking credit for innovations my team and I had created. Our revenue continued to grow, reaching $50 million annually, but so did the tension between us. Emma began excluding me from key meetings, making decisions without consulting me, and slowly pushing me to the sidelines of my own creation. I could feel the rift growing wider, but I tried to stay focused on the work that mattered. The software we were developing, the clients we were serving, the future we were building. But things were changing, and it was impossible to ignore. Then came Dad's 60th birthday party, the day everything changed. The party was Emma's idea, of course. She rented out the grand ballroom of the city's most expensive hotel and invited all our business associates. It felt more like a networking event than a birthday celebration, but that was Emma's style. Everything had to serve a purpose. I arrived early to help with the preparations, wearing a simple black dress. The moment I walked in, Emma immediately criticized me. "Couldn't you have made more of an effort?" she hissed. "These are important people coming tonight." I ignored her comment, focusing on greeting guests as they arrived. The room filled quickly with business associates, clients and family friends. Emma worked the room like a seasoned politician while I stayed in the background, making sure everything ran smoothly. During dinner, Emma clinked her glass, signaling for attention. She stood up to give a speech. I expected the usual, maybe a touching tribute to Dad, or some childhood memory. But instead she dropped a bomb that would shatter our family forever. "As we celebrate Dad's 60th birthday," Emma began, her voice carrying across the silent room. I think it's time to announce some changes at Larkin Technology. The board has agreed that the company needs unified leadership to move forward. My heart stopped. Board meetings. What board meetings? For too long, Emma continued, her eyes locking onto mine. We've been held back by outdated thinking and resistance to change. That's why, effective immediately, I will be taking over as sole CEO. It's time for certain elements that are no longer serving our growth to step aside. The room erupted in murmurs. My blood ran cold as I sat there frozen, completely blindsided. Emma's announcement felt like a personal attack disguised as a corporate decision. She wasn't just taking over the company, she was taking control of the narrative of everything I had worked for. Some people, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, are better suited to technical roles rather than leadership. My sister Claire has been adequate in maintaining our legacy systems. But to compete in today's market, we need vision, we need excellence. And frankly, Claire, you're just not cut out for this level of business. I looked at Dad desperately hoping he would stand up for me, but instead he was nodding along with Emma's words, a proud smile on his face. My heart sank. Mom, sitting beside him, stared at her plate, her hands trembling slightly, unable to meet my eyes. The truth is, Emma continued, her voice rising, you're worthless in today's business world, Claire. Your old-fashioned ideas and lack of proper business education have become a liability. It's time for you to step aside gracefully. The silence in the room was deafening. Hundreds of eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. I could feel the pity, the disdain, the judgment, the whispers behind my back. Everything I had built, every sacrifice I had made, was being stripped away in front of everyone. I knew what they expected. They expected me to lash out, to cry, or even to shout, but I did none of those things. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot, and in that moment, all eyes were on me. With calm precision, I walked to Dad's table. I placed a small wrapped package in front of him. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said quietly, my voice steady. Then I turned and walked out of the ballroom, my head held high. The whispers followed me as I left the room, but I didn't care. That night, I sat in my office, surrounded by awards and patents that bore my name. The victory that Emma and Dad thought they had achieved was only temporary. I knew that. I knew I was far from done. They thought I was finished, but they had underestimated me. Tomorrow would bring changes they never saw coming. I said quietly, then I walked out of the ballroom, head held high, leaving behind the whispers and stare. That night, as I sat in my home office surrounded by awards and patents that bore my name, I made a decision. Emma thought she had won, but she had forgotten one crucial detail, something that would turn her moment of triumph into the biggest mistake of her life. As I powered up my laptop and began typing, a small smile played on my lips. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. After all, there's more than one way to run a successful business. And I had learned more in 10 years than Emma had learned in all her fancy business classes. The next morning would bring changes that none of them saw coming. Changes that would make them realize exactly how worthless I really was. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the office early, before anyone else, and waited. At precisely 9, Emma strode through the front doors with Dad beside her, both wearing triumphant smiles that were about to be wiped from their faces. "Sarah," Emma's voice held a mix of surprise and annoyance. "What are you doing here? I thought after last night, you'd have the dignity to stay home." I smiled, remembering the email I had sent at 3:00 a.m. to every major client, partner and employee of Larkin Technologies. "Just wrapping up some loose ends, sister dear, but since you're here, we should probably talk about the company's future." "There's nothing to discuss," Dad interjected, his voice firm. "Emma's in charge now. The board has already approved it." "Yes, the board," I said, pulling out my tablet. "Let's talk about that." You see, while Emma was busy planning parties and giving interviews, I was actually building this company, and there are a few things you both seem to have forgotten. I pulled up a document on the conference room's main screen. "First, let me remind you that I own 51% of Larkin Technology shares. When we incorporated 10 years ago, Dad gave Emma and me equal shares of 25% each, keeping 50% for himself. But 3 years ago, when we needed capital for expansion, Dad sold me 6% of the shares. Remember that day, Dad? You were too busy attending Emma's award ceremony to handle the negotiations yourself, so you signed the papers without reading them carefully." The color drained from both their faces. Emma's perfectly manicured hands gripped the conference table. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Dad would never," I continued, pulling up more documents. "And that's not all. the core software that generates 80% of our revenue is not owned by Larkin Technologies. It's owned by my separate company Larkin Innovations. Larkin Technologies only has a licensing agreement, which expires. I checked my watch. About 10 minutes ago, Dad collapsed into a chair, realization dawning on his face. The renewal paper, the ones you asked me to sign last week. The ones you were too busy to read because you were helping Emma plan the party. Yes, those papers. I decided not to submit them. Emma's face contorted with rage. You underhanded little. Careful, sister. I cut her off. You might want to hear the rest before you finish that sentence. While you were busy announcing my supposedly graceful exit last night, I was sending emails to our clients. You see, most of our major clients have personal loyalty clauses in their contract. They signed with Larkin Technologies because of me, my expertise and my track record. I pulled up my email, showing the dozens of responses that had already arrived. Would you like to know how many have already triggered their contract termination clause, or how many of our top developers, who by the way are actually employed by Larkin Innovations, have already accepted positions at my new venture? The room fell silent. Through the glass walls we could see employees gathering, whispers spreading as they checked their email. Emma's perfect composure cracked as she frantically checked her phone. You can't do this, she stammered. The company you tried to steal from me, I finished for her, my voice cold and steady. The one you thought you could just take over because you have an MBA and Dad's approval. That company ceased to exist the moment you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. I stood up, smoothing my dress. So here are your options. Option 1, I walk away with my shares, my software, my clients and my employee. Chen Technologies becomes an empty shell, and you can explain to all those important people you invited last night why the company's value dropped to zero overnight. Dad's face had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. Option 2, he asked weakly. Option 2, you both I take full control of Chen Technologies. You keep your shares as silent partners, receiving dividends but having no say in operations. Emma gets a nice severance package, and glowing references for her next job somewhere far away from here. Emma's face had turned an interesting shade of red. You planned this all along, didn't you? You've just been waiting for the right moment to stab us in the back. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, Emma, I spent 10 years trying to be a good daughter and sister while you both took me for granted. I built this company from nothing while you collected accolades for my work. I only planned this. I checked my watch again. About 12 hours ago, after you called me worthless in front of everyone we know. My phone buzzed again. Another client termination notice. Time's running out. What's it going to be? The next hour was a blur of paperwork and lawyers. By noon I sat alone in what was now my office, looking out over the city. The company I had built was now truly mine, but the victory felt hollow. Family relationships lay in ruins around me, trust shattered like dropped crystal. Mom came to see me that evening. Her eyes were red from crying. Did it have to end this way? She asked softly. They gave me no choice, I replied, my voice gentle but firm. They would have taken everything I built and discarded me without a second thought. She nodded slowly, understanding but sad. What happens now? I showed her the plans I had already drawn up. Expansions, new product lines, innovations I had been holding back. Now I build something even bigger. But this time, I do it without having to carry people who see me as worthless. Over the next year, Chen Technologies under my sole leadership tripled in value. Emma found a job with a startup in Silicon Valley, humbled, but hopefully wise. Dad retired, finally understanding that his golden child had nearly destroyed his legacy. We see each other at holidays, maintaining a polite distance that masks the wounds that may never fully heal. Sometimes late at night I look at old family photos and feel a twinge of sadness for what we lost. But then I remember that night at the birthday party, the look of disdain on Emma's face, the way Dad nodded along with her cruel words. In business, and in family, respect is earned, not given. They learned that lesson too late. As for me, I learned that sometimes the quiet ones, the ones dismissed as worthless, are the ones you should watch out for, because we're the ones who know how to build something from nothing, and how to take it all back when others try to steal it. My story spread through business circles, a cautionary tale about underestimating the wrong person. These days, when I attend industry events, I often catch whispers. That's Claire Larkin, the one who. They never finish the sentence, but they don't have to. My success speaks for itself. Last week I received an invitation to speak at Emma's business school graduation ceremony. The topic: hidden strengths, the power of underestimated leaders. I accepted the invitation with a small smile, already planning my speech. After all, I have quite a story to tell. The company continues to thrive under my leadership, but more importantly, I found peace with my decisions. Sometimes the strongest message you can send is simply proving people wrong, and sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about rising so high that they can't help but see their own mistakes. As I write this from my office overlooking the city, I'm reminded of something my mother once told me: success is the best revenge, but wisdom is knowing when to stop seeking revenge and start seeking growth. She was right. I've moved past the need for revenge. Now, these days, I focus on building something meaningful, something that will outlast all the petty jealousies and family drama. I still keep that wrapped birthday present I never gave Dad, a photo album of the company's journey, from that tiny repair shop to what it is today. Maybe someday when the wounds have healed enough, I'll finally give it to him. Until then, it serves as a reminder that our greatest strengths often come from the very things others underestimate about us.